Awesome. All right. So now that you've seen half of the slides, we can get started. So the way that this talk is going to go is not your standard tech talk, because to get the entire scope of the of what was going on at AWS reInvent, we would need more than 1 hour and more than probably 5 days that it lasts for. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go over what reInvent is, what it really represents in numbers. Then we're going to discuss what you need to think of and what you need to prepare for before you go. Then what you are going to do while at the conference, what are some good to-dos and not to-dos. And of course, something that everybody's wondering, whether this is worth it. How do we even pick the talk, or the session rather? What do we attend? What is better? What is a better bang for your buck? And what is the more interesting topics that we should, attend during the conference? Why is reInvent so interesting? What is the good, the beautiful, the bad, essentially all the fun things about it that you could be asking yourself about the conference. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the themes, and this is just something that every participant of reInvent kind of observes over the duration of the event. You notice that there's more conversation topics leaning in one direction or in the other direction, and certain things stick with you and leave you with, this overall happy impression of, I've learned X, I've learned Y, I am going to continue researching in direction Z. So this is kind of an overall very subjective. I think this is what has been an overall direction of reInvent from my perspective, because these were the talks that I was attending, and these were the things I was noticing when the speakers were discussing them. Lastly, we're going to go over yays or nays for Expo, vendor parties, and replay, where Expo is this large basically event where everybody comes in with their businesses, with their products, with their presentations. It's the size of a stadium, and there's lots and lots of talking, swag, games, raffles, and whatnot going on for basically all the participants to get to know each other, to network, and to find out which products they could use. Vendor parties, much smaller events, generally concentrated around vendors themselves and their products. So if you're interested specifically in something by JetBrains, you would go to their party. And lastly, replay, which has absolutely nothing to do with tech other than, well, obviously the tech that supports it. It is a huge musical event / festival that has, again, lots of games, lots of music, and it generally falls on on second to last day, Thursday, which is also the unofficially last day of reInvent, where everybody just comes in to relax, party, and call it a happy presentation at the end of it. So yeah, and then lastly, very subjective, the verdict, why I think it's worth your time and why I think it's a cool event to attend. And we're going to have some more questions and answers. One thing that I do want to make sure that we do, because there are some things that I might not cover, and I'm sure there's also people who've attended the conference who might have questions or their feedback. After every slide, I'm going to make like a small pause and ask if you guys have any questions or any feedback. And then we're going to move on to the next slides. For the sessions and session types, I'm going to try to follow, the approach where I'm going to talk only about most of the good things, a little bit of the bad things, but it's a compliment sandwich. Most of the time, the good heavily outweighs the bad, which is why we kind of want to go to reInvent. So that's the plan. And before I move on to the next slide, does anybody have any questions or feedback? Cool, moving on. So AWS in numbers. Sometimes people wonder, what is the event? Why is it so big? Why do so many people attend? And it's really hard to grasp until you hear those numbers. There are 6 venues, and 50,000 people attended, or over 50,000 people attended in 2022. Where 300,000 people watched simultaneously online during the event. Now, we're not talking about who watched the event afterwards. This is just what was happening during those 5 days. Now, when you think that that's a lot, that's actually not that bad, because when we were talking to the cabbie who was taking us back to the airport, we actually found out that there's 100,000 people coming in for the annual cowboy convention too. And there were a lot of people dressed as cowboys. We were wondering whether they were just the participants trying to like Marco Polo one another that way, dressing up as cowboys. No, the convention was preparing to happen, and they're apparently much more massive than we were. It was kind of nice to feel that we're not as much of a nuisance on Las Vegas. Then 26,000 sessions during the event are split between, again, 5 days. Traditionally, 4 days is when you get a lot of those in-person, the meat and potatoes talks. Friday being the last day, generally a couple of last-minute sessions. There could be the certifications going on Friday as well, but that is the day when everybody just kind of like drops off and flies away because it's cheaper on the ticket purchasing. But think of it as 4 days, maybe 2,200 sessions, and then another 200 sessions. Still a lot, to 400 sessions, still a lot, but that would be your Friday. And as a result of this, and we're not talking about donations by the partners, we're not talking about like actual cash donations by the participants. This was the actions of participants, to pay it forward during the event by, carrying water for, half a block really, to kind of find out how hard it is to carry water when you're out in the desert and you have to do it every day. That built 4 freshwater pipe systems in Kenya. Or then we were exercising. There were 5K walks. There were different kinds of like 5-minute little competitions where you would get on a treadmill or on a rowing machine and just exercise. And that raised $40,000 worth of donations to Fred Hutchinson Cancer Foundation. So all of these things are the good things that are being done without us even realizing it, just kind of like going from place to place, having fun, and the impact is there. So over 360 sponsors. Again, that's a completely different category. These are the partners and the companies that chose to donate to reInvent happening, as well as whatever the causes that reInvent is supporting. And then 69 product announcements that happened during the event, which I will probably not cover even, I will not even scratch the surface of which announcements were made, but it is just kind of crazy to realize that every year they prepare so many things to talk about. So any questions? Just a quick note, the picture over here on the left is, I tried to take a picture of myself doing it, but I did not like myself carrying really heavy buckets. I guess probably the effort of carrying was probably a much better thing to put in, but that guy looks better. He looks strong. He looks like he's not breaking over carrying those buckets. I did. So it's kind of how it looked. And yeah, I got on a rowing machine and it was a lot of fun. And then we just basically got to take a photo and moved on. Now, before you go, and now that I've got you on the hook, everybody wants to go now. How do you prepare? And how do you get yourself more or less familiar with what you need to do? First of all, always check your inbox for promotions. As developers, we're already using a lot of products that could potentially be tangentially related with AWS. For me, that was JetBrains. They're one of the partners, and I just got a $150 coupon from them. I mean, obviously, I wasn't the only one who got it. I was on some sort of a mailing list, but that was a nice little surprise that saved me some money. Otherwise, Reddit would be great to go check it out. And again, any kind of partners, including AWS themselves, who could invite you and offer you a coupon. So it's something nice to look out for. Unless you're planning to interact with Marketing Avalanche that will follow inevitably after the expo, do not give away your personal phone number or email. I made that mistake the first time that I went to the conference, and they've gotten much more sophisticated. They must be using the reInvent tools. They must be using all of those great visualizations and search algorithms. They have connected the phone number that I submitted 4 years ago to the system. Ever since then, it was just 111, 111, 1111. They have somehow connected all of the personalities of Olga around their database, and I'm getting calls still now. I got one today. So be very careful and set up a custom email filter, because you will get a lot of marketing emails in relation to some products that you actually just walked past. There's definitely the beacon technology that is being used to kind of detect that you have walked past a booth or an event, and if you stuck around there just a little bit longer than whatever their threshold is, you will get emailed. Move fast. That is a big one, including move fast past the booths so that you don't get contacted. But most importantly, move fast in order to book the plane tickets and to book your accommodations. The event happens in Las Vegas, has been happening for the past several years in Las Vegas. The vendors, the hotels have gotten quite complacent with reInvent happening there all the time. That last week of November, for the hotels that offer the sleeping accommodations and host the sessions, the accommodations there will be very expensive. And honestly, even if you plan in advance, they'll still be expensive because they have already booked up in their mind that week, last week of November, and they essentially just would have raised the prices way before you even realized you want to go. But all the other hotels in the area haven't done that yet. So always keep an eye out on the map, and I'll show you the map of where the venues are going to be, which are the sleeper hotels, which are the event hotels, and try to plan your accommodations in one of those if you want to save some money, because essentially the idea is that you're going to be at the event all day. You don't really want to be, sleeping or sitting in your room. So it doesn't really matter how great your room is, as long as it's on the strip. It's right there. You can walk to the venue, and you can get to your session as soon as possible. You do need to book the talks as soon as they open. That is a big contention point with the attendees of reInvent. There are people who book very quickly. There are people who use bots to book very quickly. So you want to plan out your day, even if you already can't book the talk that you're really, really interested in. You need to either add yourself to the wait list, or you need to add it as a contingency plan and come super early to attend that session if it is something that you're really interested in. If you're looking to get a certification, that is, again, something that you need to book and arrange in advance, because usually the certification would be cheaper during the event. And in addition to that, you get swag if you get certified. If you don't get any swag. Same thing about the celebration reception. So if you're successful, there's going to be, it was backpacks for us. Last year I didn't do it, but it was really cool. They had like really cool looking jackets last year. I was a little bit jealous. So yeah, unique swag, something that you won't get unless you have gotten certified during reInvent. Install AWS Events app. That's just your mobile app that will inform you of all of the events. That will allow you to plan it on your calendar. Join AWS Discord, not required. Actually, it was much easier to use Twitter this last year around, but a lot of people still choose to join it, especially if they wish to attend the vendor parties. And lastly, pack lightly and dress smart. A lot of people tend to come in kind of business casual, but shoes is the most important thing. Even if you have your nice little shirt and your blazer, the shoes should, if not completely informal, they should be walking shoes. They should be shoes that will allow you to stumble, get lost, go through construction. Things happen, and every year there's a lot of detours that you have to get to even get to your session. All right, questions? Moving on. While at the conference. So this is something, again, along the lines of installing the app. On the app, you will be able to pre-register for a badge scan. Once you have that pre-registration, you already have the barcode. You're basically bypassing all the people that haven't done that. You can go straight into the quick check-in line, and you can get your swag, and you can get out of there before the crowd hits. In fact, if you do arrive earlier, which usually people choose to arrive on Sunday, even if you're tired, it is worthwhile to go and get your swag and get your registration as soon as possible, because the next day it's going to be crazy. As I mentioned already, prepare to walk a lot, prepare to get lost, and take advantage of provided breakfast and lunch. As you can see, the picture down here is of what the food room looks like. It is very nice. There's lots and lots of food choices. There are choices for vegetarians, there's choices for vegans, there's choices for your regular meat eaters and people with allergies of all sorts. So they have accounted for all potential food restrictions that the participants might have. And at the same time, they're big tables, and they're geared towards people sitting there and interacting. Now, not often do people interact, but at least you get the semblance of human activity when you sit at the table and, maybe even discuss a session. A couple of words go a long way. Thursday, I keep mentioning this, is the unofficial end day. If you are not into the EDM music zone, if you don't want to be staying up late and partying your mind out, you probably don't want to stay much further than Thursday afternoon, because that's when replay hits. And on Friday, unless you have your certification set up, you probably don't want to stay, and you can leave pretty much as soon as that's over. The keynotes is on Thursday though, so attend that one if you can, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. And goes without saying, try to avoid any provocative situations. It being Las Vegas, there's a lot of cartoon characters. There's a lot of flamingo dressed ladies walking around trying to take a photo with you. It's a lot more expensive than you think, and it's a lot more embarrassing if they put you on the spot. And it happens every year. We get warned every year, and it still happens. So on here, there's a couple of photos of me. I actually managed to snipe a spot on the giant blackboard where people would write their company's names. Some took more space than others. I very quickly wrote it in, took a photo, and there was already a team of 20 something people running in and trying to erase the board and put their company name on. So it's a competitive scene to put yourself on the map of AWS. So yeah, lots of fun. Any questions?
Did you find any potential Solution Street candidates while you were there socializing with all these folks?
You'll be surprised how many people are actually asking, is your company hiring? Now, did I find anybody who is, I don't know, potential candidate? I don't think so, because I'm not the most screen the person on the spot sort of personality. I'm very nice. I asked them about themselves. I asked them about what they like to do. I smiled, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't know if we need you. Kind of want to run away as soon as possible. So an HR person at reInvent would be a fantastic addition, actually, because there are people seeking jobs and there are people seeking partnerships. So it is definitely a good question to ask.
Is there, in this being the big digital era, do people use business cards and hand them out anymore, or is that showing my age a bit too much?
So I think it depends on the event too. I think reInvent has done a really good job of essentially distributing your personal information to essentially every vendor and every business attending. There is an interesting concept that they introduced last year where, well, first of all, you're wearing a badge, and the badge has your name on it, your company, and basically all the information that you've volunteered. You're a developer, you're an HR person. But in addition to that, there's also chat rooms where you can register with your badge, and that's basically where you're going to like interact with other people. This is your business card. You put that little profile of yourself, registering yourself as ready to mingle, essentially, and everybody who's interested, or if you're interested in getting to or speaking to somebody, this is what you would send them. You would send them that request. Additionally, there were also like little badges that you would get, and I don't have one ready here, unfortunately. I will take a screenshot and I'll send it to you guys. A screenshot, a photo. It has a little arrow, so you can move it around. There's like, red, please don't talk to me. There's green, talk to me now, and then there's yellow, I could be responsive to some conversation. Essentially, that's my translation of what this means. But that's another way that you would do it. And again, once somebody approaches you, you have your card instead, you have your badge instead of your business card, and then the conversation goes. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does. I feel like it's a little bit sad. I used to work a lot of conferences back in my previous job, and that's one of the things you would do is when you'd meet somebody, sure, you're wearing a name tag and you can talk to people and say, oh, hey, how you going? You can network with as many people as you want. But when you actually talk to somebody, I always found that it was handy to have a business card to hand out or to get from them. And then I'd write my notes on the back about the person, because let's be honest, how are we going to remember all the different people we're talking to? And now in this digital age, you don't really have that. Sure, you could pull out your app and you could take some notes on your app, but then suddenly your head's down in your phone and you're very antisocial like that. I just think it's interesting how things have changed, and I guess everyone's gone away from that. I mean, me being old school, I'd probably bring my own business cards and take my own notes and stuff like that, and maybe I'd stand out as the old timer with the business cards, but
I would not call it old time. No. That's
really
good
interesting about the arrow saying talk to me, don't talk to me, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's specific to a tech conference like this or if it's just a standard for conferences from now on, but I almost feel like you shouldn't have that. Like if you're going to this conference, you're probably there to talk to people. At least you should be, especially if your company's paying for it.
I'm proud to announce that I was in the yellow. I was not green, not full on green, but I was in the yellow.
Interesting.
I do want to mention again, this being a subjective, my experience at the conference, I was rotating among people of about the same kind of, I guess, opinion of the whole human interaction at the conference. You come, you talk a little bit about tech, and then you just kind of like all split into different directions. There is a management route. And by management, I don't necessarily mean specifically management. There's a slightly non-technical CEO / HR route that you can go. And I feel like that would be probably night and day as opposed to, the purely tech side of things. Because in that respect, there are people who are probably, especially at the vendor parties, I did see people giving out business cards. It's not a norm that I see like normally at the expo, for example, people, hey, here's my business card. But at the vendor parties, that does happen. I think that's like a whole new level of relationship between, the attendee of the vendor party and, the host essentially. Because at that point, you're like not just expressing your interest, but you're like, yeah, we will probably get in touch. Because everything else, like while you're going through the conference, a lot of people similar to myself are very polite about, hey, yeah, sure, let's catch up, but not necessarily are extremely looking forward to it because we're trying to, I don't know, run from session to session, find where our lunch is going to be. So it's like it's a very I don't know, passerby sort of attitude. But when you do want to interact with somebody, when you are looking for a specific product or for specific contact, this is when, I'm assuming people break out their business cards. And I feel like that's pretty effective.
Cool. Yeah, that said, Joel, if you ever want me to go to one of these conferences, I think he just logged off, didn't he? I'll talk to anybody. Anyway, carry on. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So here we're stepping into the choosing talks side, and I'll walk very briefly through this one because the actual choosing talks part is in the depth further in the slides. But essentially, watch out for specific types of talks. Client, partner, and sponsored are generally the partners of AWS. So it's probably, hey, here's our product, here's how we're using AWS products, or hey, here's how our product could help you in your endeavors. Not necessarily something that you're essentially looking for if you were coming to brush up on, or not to brush up, but to learn more about AWS products. But if you are looking for that specific scene, if you're looking for a new partner or for a new product to use, that would be something that you would target. Essentially, those tags communicate to different types of people. To me, that communicated that would be probably the next, if I didn't find any other like techie talks, that would be the next tier that I would look at, but that would not be on the top of my list. The next thing is, as you see here on the map, in yellow are the hotels that are both a venue and a sleeper hotel, and that basically means that there'll be sessions there. Those are also the most expensive hotels there are on the strip. Everything here is generally 3-4 times more expensive than what you would find on the blue side of things. And then whatever you find on the blue side of things, which is, your regular sleeping room hotel that they recommend that you sleep at, everything from there, also take it with a grain of salt. There are hotels in between on the same strip that are much cheaper. Again, we stayed near the MGM Grand in Excalibur, and it was just times cheaper. It was just the same quality of accommodations that you would get elsewhere. So but the reason I'm mentioning this is because as long as you stay on the strip and as long as you stay to close to one of the venue hotels, there are shuttles, and they're going to afford you about 15 minutes of travel between one venue and the other. And that is how you should be evaluating which sessions you're going to attend. Essentially, if you have a session in one end of the strip, so say at Encore, and you really wanted to go to MGM Grand, you probably want to buy yourself at least half an hour of time so that you can exit Venetian, find your bus, and then come to Encore, to MGM. But the most important thing is that if you have reserved the talk and you actually do have reservation, you're not on the waiting list, you want to also arrive 10 minutes earlier, because otherwise your reservation is going to get dropped and all the walk-ins are going to come in, and then you're risking to lose your spot. It's very important to always plan for those. That's why I say do not book more than 3 talks per day. You can always add on 1 or 2. You can always switch to a contingency plan, but these 3 talks, the solid ones that you want to attend, aim to attend those, and then everything else that follows, try to look at venues that are right near you, because it's it's deceptively close. It seems like, hey, it's just 4 buildings away, I'll be able to make it. There's always construction, there's always some sort of confusions, there's always delays. You're going through the hotels, which at all times there's, blockages, there's people, all of these factors add up. Questions? All right. Now we're stepping into the session types. And as I said, this is going to be the compliment sandwich, the good, the bad, and the beautiful. And these sessions, I actually kind of organized them by the type. There are different actual by the books names for these sessions. So bring your own device talks are basically everything that I classify as bring your own device. Our workshops, builder sessions, game day, and dev lounge. This is where you learn about your products, about your services hands-on, you code, you follow along. And if you have any questions, there's actual experts who designed the product that are going to answer your questions. And they're going to give you advice. I mean, they're the people who essentially know everything about the product. The bad is the code alongs are generally your freemium AWS tutorials. You could get those for almost free unless it's something with machine learning on AWS. Just kind of go through those tutorials that way. But then you don't get the benefit of the speaker. You don't get the benefit of the entire sandbox that basically all of these resources come to you completely for free. You can work on a personal project that is tangentially related to what the topic of the follow along is. And you can ask the expert about the implementations for it. It is incredibly powerful because and sometimes you just don't know whether it's going to cost you or your client a lot of money. And this is where you play around, you find out, you essentially get to evaluate it. Workshops are generally for an additional fee. It's an all day long sit-down event where essentially they either prepare you for certification or there's a massive run through a specific service that they provide. And it will be noted it will be noted that it costs an additional generally $250 I've seen for the session. Game day is a competition. It is a lot of fun. You solve pretend business problems with the use of AWS products that are generally cutting edge, and it's a fantastic way to again try something out, work with other people. This is a team event, and figure out how you place compared to all the other teams and all the other professionals. Dev Lounge is informal and it's geared towards direct collaboration and Q&A with the specialists and different businesses about the product and its uses. So essentially, if you want to go to something where you do the follow along, that would be your build a session. If you want to compete, that's your game day. If you want to talk to people and show them your problem and collaborate in a much more cozy personal environment, that's Dev Lounge. And if you want to have an entire day dedicated to a specific theme, that would be your workshop. Questions? So here's some photos while you're thinking about your questions. We did go to AWS Game Day, and our team is team number 5. We finished 5th. We were for a long time 2nd, and then we weren't. So it was a little bit upsetting, but we were still pretty proud of ourselves because there were 38 teams, I believe, and finishing 5th was pretty exciting. Chill is my husband's nickname. His name is Chris. His last name is Hill. So game day and chill. And to the left, you see a photo of AWS reInvent teaching us how to move an Azure C#.NET application, the Majestic monolith, to microservices on AWS. It was hilarious. Learned more about the strangler pattern. It was great to convert a monolith application into microservices. I still am not sold on AWS services over Azure for C#.NET applications, but that's just me. Any questions before I move on to the next slide? Cool. Traditional sessions are split in my opinion, are generally the chalk talks and breakout sessions. This is where they talk. This is where there's a giant presentation screen, there's your speaker or 2 or 3, and they walk you through the products through a demo or a case study. This is not something where you normally code, but you can bring your device and take notes. The presentations do feel a little bit canned because the speakers need a structure to get through, but that's by design. And you guys are encouraged to sit in the front and ask questions. Sometimes those questions will guide the conversation completely in a different direction, which is, again, why there is, the need for that structure a little bit. But the idea is that it is a conversation. It is the chalk talk, they draw on the board, they explain concepts, they could, give you fantastic ideas of how to use a specific service or a product in one way or the other. Or potential side effect of that is somebody really, really asked a question that does not apply to your personal case, and then you're just sitting there and listening to it. It's still learning, but that's why I'm encouraging. If you have a question, if you attended that talk that you really wanted to, and you booked it in advance, sitting in the front and asking that question is worthwhile, because the chalk talks and the breakout sessions are not recorded. Those things, this is the meat and potatoes. This is the reason AWS reInvent partially, exists, because otherwise, if they posted all the talks, then what's the point? We just watch them online. But these are the ones that you want to attend together with a code alongs or follow alongs to make sure that you get like the full experience of reInvent. There's different levels of it for breakout sessions, and numbers, they generally guide you that level 100 is for brand new person who doesn't know anything yet and about the service specifically, or 400 is for when you're really advanced in it. The numbers are subjective in my opinion. Beginner sessions not necessarily only contain beginner information, and advanced sessions will still introduce you into the service before it goes into the depth, and for some people that's more than enough to understand what they're looking for. So do not let the numbers restrict you. And again, pay attention to the sponsor tags. If that's what you're looking for, that should be your first signal that you should be attending it, because it will be heavily geared towards the sponsor's product. If you're not interested in that, partially that talk is advertising the sponsor's product. If you're not interested in the advertisement, move on to something else. Questions? In the meantime, here's the pictures. This was the OpenTelemetry talk that I was taking pictures of, and it was a very big turnout. It was actually kind of interesting because the line out of the doors for this was pretty big. I'm impressed that everybody was able to get in. OpenTelemetry apparently is a huge talking point for a lot of people. All right. Lastly, we've got Blitz talks, and I'll blitzly walk through this. These are bite-sized 10-minute presentations. They are not necessarily bound to a specific place. They could be during the expo, so you just come up to a booth and you get that Blitz talk, and then you get swag for it. Or you could go into the great little alcove that Salesforce has basically booked already with reInvent. There's always a Salesforce presence, a massive Salesforce presence at reInvent. You can come in there and you can get talked to for 10 minutes about every single aspect of Salesforce or its products. And then there's also going to be some of those where you sit down in a theater, put on some headphones, and listen to a 10-minute session that way. Those were essentially the, I wouldn't call them, you would never want to treat them as filler, because they are you either know everything or you don't know anything. If you don't know anything, that's your welcome introduction. Here's a service, or here's an aspect of a service. If you know everything, that aspect of a service is probably going to go a long way for you. The ones at the expo are generally presentation of the service or of the product, and again, those generally lend you a lot of result in a lot of swag. So that's technically one of the biggest reasons people attend those. But then again, you also learn things, so it's a cool little breather for you to get in between big talks and big sessions. Questions? Cool. All right. Lastly, we've got keynotes. Those are big. Those are the most popular ones. Those are probably what people watch online. They do get released online, and I normally would say it's a subjective skip if you want to watch these online, because there isn't going to be much tech, much meat and potatoes to this. There's going to be great products. There's going to be potentially corporate messages and values that are going to discuss. There's going to be introductions of new tech and new integrations and new improvements. It is geared to rile you up. It's geared to make you excited. It's geared to make you part of the community, cheer, have a beer, clap your hands, listen to music before the speaker starts. These are the events that are what makes AWS this posh event with lights and parties, something that turns it into a holiday for developers. But they did introduce some really cool things. And during Peter DeSantis's speech, which Peter DeSantis is the I want to say vice president of computing. Yeah, utility computing. Yeah, so he was talking a lot about the hardware tech, the nitro cards. That's for the nitro chips that were released for the instances where you want a faster network. So they have network acceleration. They inferentiate 2 chips for the instances where you want to do your ML and AI, because they have a higher floating point precision. And then Graviton 3E is your next tier to the all-purpose much more productive instances that you generally want to upgrade as soon as they come out, unless you're locked into a contract. For Java people here, AWS Lambda Snap Start was introduced, which, I mean, not necessarily for Java people, but I feel like that's groundbreaking for Java people, because at this point, one of the deal breakers was that it takes such a long time for the cold instance to warm up and then to finally run your code. Now there is a snapshot of a pre-warmed runtime environment. It is fantastic. You're basically bypassing that whole waiting time, which, it could matter. The warm up could matter in terms of time. And Amazon Event Bridge pipes and no-code Salesforce integration. As I mentioned, Salesforce is there to stay, and Salesforce definitely comes into a lot of talks and introduces their no-code seamless integrations via Event Bridge. So event-driven, what happens in Salesforce gets immediately communicated to AWS and vice versa. It's crazy. Again, available online, very crowded, very exciting. Subjective skip because you can watch it online. Subjective attend if you want to feel as part of the group, part of the crowd, and cheer for things. So, do you guys have any questions? And in the meantime, here are the photos from the keynotes. On the left is Werner Vogels. He is the CTO. He was naming a very, very large number. I don't remember why, but it was kind of funny. And one of the partners during the Peter DeSantis talk, that's the bottom photo, was Formula One. And they were explaining something about cars. And that definitely went way above my head, but it looked cool. Red lights, flashing lights, music. That's what they're there for. And also Peter DeSantis walked us through the logic and algorithm behind the nitro chips and how the network acceleration is actually achieved. Questions? Well, running themes, observability, security, asynchronousness, and event-drivenness. In 2021, they just introduced OpenSearch and Open Dashboards. In 2022, they're like, hey, we now have ML integrations for all of this. There's anomaly detection. There's all kinds of cool things that we can do. There's community source dashboards. This was it. This was where I was sold on, maybe let's not use, vendor-based observability tools. We can easily set up a tool like this, essentially a New Relic clone, based off of what people have on the community managed marketplaces for free. Obviously, you still have to host the OpenSearch and Open Dashboards, but the idea is that it's there and it's something that you can make geared towards your business very easily. 2021, Lambda suddenly started making a huge comeback after everybody went right back into majestic monoliths. In 2022, there's now talk of drag and drop serverless application frameworks and event-driven pipelines. Drag and drop serverless application framework, that's the AWS application composer. That was one of the products that I introduced, and it's currently in beta testing. I have not tried it. I am very interested to see what it's like. Lastly, Werner Vogels has said something interesting and a little bit ominous, not in the worst case, but not in the worst sense, but more like, hey, this is something to look out for, and this is going to be interesting to watch the developments for. The world is asynchronous. Everybody who thinks that the world is not is deceiving themselves, and everything that seems like it is synchronous is just an illusion. So again, not saying it's ominous in the negative sense, but I am saying it's something to look out for, and I'm looking forward to the continuation of this theme in 2023. Questions? Cool. So I have been mentioning OpenSearch a bunch, and just quite a quick run through, because this is what I took out essentially from the event. I attended a lot of OpenSearch talks exclusively because this is something that I'm running a personal project on, and this is something that I have been considering in the back of my mind of trying to move my client over to instead of Elasticsearch. And this is where it comes in. It's basically a fork of Elasticsearch, but it's free, open search. It's the community and spearheaded by AWS. It's the community open source edition of Elasticsearch with all the features that you could find in later, we're talking 7 and up versions of Elasticsearch for free. And they went further. They made it much more complex, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But essentially, it looks similar. If you have ever seen the Elasticsearch Kibana, you have your own your little dev tools where you can write queries in their language and essentially get all of your documents that way. Or there's a query workbench where you can write your queries in SQL. That's not something that became available until Elasticsearch 7. And this is what I'm working with right now in one of my projects, Elasticsearch 6.8. I wish I had the SQL. I wish I had the power of selecting things and joining and doing all of that, just because switching from one project to another, if some of you guys switch from one to the other and you deal with SQL in one, you come in, oh my God, I still have my SQL skills that I can apply here. But most importantly, it's free and it's very well supported by the community. There's over 100 different features that they've added since 2018. There's lots of releases and lots of plans that they're still maintaining to continue OpenSearch and open dashboards. Here's some plugins and visualizations for you. One of the plugins for OpenSearch dashboards is observability. This is what I was talking about. This is where you can, well, first of all, again, if you don't want to build it by yourself, you can download the community plugins, or you can use what they have in here to kind of facilitate it and set up, little visualizations for yourself. There's already templates. But basically built on the concept of open telemetry. So essentially you're already expecting that your logs and your metrics and your traces are coming in. It already knows how to display it. It already knows, which patterns to look for. And the more things you add, the more plugins you add, the more sophisticated smart it gets. We're talking anomaly detection. We're talking drilling down all the way to the cause of the problem. We're talking about, graphing things that you didn't even know that, existed, that the problem existed, just to find an n+1 query. So this is, I think, one of the greatest things that they could probably pull out for essentially as a open source project. I find this exciting. And that was the sophisticated part. On the right side, the less sophisticated part, that's just your regular word cloud from the entities, and in terms that, again, extracted automatically and just put it for you in a little word cloud. Apparently, in the last 15 months, in the newspapers that I was fetching from Central Asian resources, Kazakhstan was one of the top keywords. So interesting. Questions? All right, I was touching up on ML. One of the new things that they introduced in 2022 is semantic search. Now, semantic search is groundbreaking because instead of using your regular, text search, so the BM25 algorithm where it just looks for the terms and entities and tries to match up that way, or using KNN, which is k-nearest neighbor, being very layman terms, but because I wouldn't be able to explain it much more technically, but it's fine-grained way of determining via the vector distance how certain words and certain search results relate. For example, you're more likely to find a book by the same more books by the same author. But in addition to that, even so, if you search for something like Wild West, here's like the examples that you get, the result one versus result 2, Wild West extracting the part West, if it's a simple BM25, it will find you, an article where West shows up. That's not necessarily Wild West. Semantic search, actually using the neural train model, will find, things associated with Wild West. So we're talking, a cowboy, we're talking a rodeo. instead of a wild animal that, BM25 would result in, you're finding, another photo of, a rodeo rider. And these are the things that, you're basically going to get pretty much out of the box with a pre-trained neural model. But thinking about how complex it could get if you had your own neural model is pretty incredible. Yeah. Questions? All right. Last few slides. We're on our way to the finish. Expo yay or nay is very subjective. I think it's a yay because there's a lot of product demos and there's a lot of AWS experts you can talk to. Networking and swag are cool, but the networking with AWS experts is where it's at. Because if you have a problem and if you want to know information before it even hits your inbox, like, hey, something is about to get deprecated, something is like data pipelines, they're about to get deprecated in AWS. For something like that, you find this information straight from the expert, and you find this information with strategies of how to move on, how to find the alternatives. You get that personal one-on-one time with somebody that you just, have a chat with. They're always there. They're always a little bit bored because people just run around and, pick up swag. So this is where you can find your victim and ask them all the questions about that service that you're interested in. On that flow, there is indeed an issue with data pipelines because AWS is essentially saying ETL processes need to die. We need to have a unified process where, all the data just magically gets transformed and sent in wherever it needs to be, and you don't need to write your own ETL pipelines, which is part of this initiative. Data pipelines are about to go bye-bye. What are the alternatives? There's EventBridge. There's just, hosting it and running your processes as a cron task. All of these questions you can ask, and all these questions you can evaluate with the AWS expert while, being a part of the event. So that's why it's a huge yay on my end, but you can always decide for yourself. Right. Questions? Move it on. Vendor parties, yay or nay, subjective. This is my subjective nay because I normally am not the person who makes the partnerships. And I'm normally not the person who likes being advertised and sold products. So to me, free food and drinks is cool. But the most important part, again, is for people who are the decision makers and who are looking for a product that is, that could be the next big thing for integrating with their application, with their code, with their service and whatnot. This would be their destination. You get to talk to the vendor like right there. This is where you exchange your business cards. This is where you discuss when you're going to catch on a call and potentially continue with your partnership. Questions? All right, and the verdict. So my experience is that I didn't just learn something I didn't know. I also learned something I didn't know I didn't know. I got questions straight from the horse's mouth, i.e. the people who designed the services I'm using. I got to compete and figure out that I'm doing quite well in some things that I never knew I did. And I got to try new things in a completely safe and friendly environment. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of good that we got to do as part of the event, and it was very inspiring. Just being part of the event, coming back and knowing that you've basically been like boiling in this tech. You're tired, you're exhausted, but you want to code and you want to use these practices that you just learned. You want to write that documentation as soon as possible. If for nothing else, which obviously there's plenty of other purposes to go for an event, that preventing the developer burnout by literally going there and burning out, your brains will be burnt by the end of the event. But that feeling, that happy feeling that you've learned something, that inspiration, that is one of the greatest things that you can get from the event. So yeah, this is basically the end of the presentation. One of the little small things that we do is a community there that nobody ever realizes. We just kind of like pass by and there's somebody like corralling us towards a board to vote on certain things. I voted the cereal is a soup, and I'm still in the minority, but it was it was something where I could just basically say, hey, yeah, I vote for that. Everybody agreed with me that dinner time is the best time, and it was about the same amount of early birds and night owls. Questions? One last thing I'll say before opening up to questions and or feedback. I do have notes from the event. I kept a diary of all the sessions that I've attended, just so that I remind myself what I did and how important it would be for me as a developer for Solution Street if I heard of some cool services and cool offerings by AWS. If you wanted to see that, I can share that with you. That's it. Yeah, thank you guys for coming.
Olga, one thing you didn't mention at all was the word casino.
Oh boy, yeah. See, because you live literally in a casino, that is not necessarily something that comes into your mind anymore. You just see it every day. It becomes your furniture. You come out, there's, some dude with a pipe sitting there and, potentially winning a lot of money. Yeah, it becomes such a norm.
So I'm taking you did not partake.
I gambled 50 cents.
Ooh.
I lost them, but I can proudly say that I did it, and I didn't even do it in 2022. I did it way in 2020. I'll say whichever year that was before COVID that I went. That was when I tried it, and that was my basic no.
That you won.
I wish. No, I lost.
No, you won by not spending any more, is what I'm
Oh
saying.
yeah, fair enough. Yes.
Thank you, Olga.
Yeah. Thank you
Great
guys.
job, Olga. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.